I had barely been home from deployment a week when it all kicked off. My lake cabin, my one peaceful retreat, had always been a quiet, tucked-away spot. But somehow, it caught the attention of the local HOA president, Karen. Now I'd heard rumors she was over the top about the rules, but nothing prepared me for what she did next. I had parked my Jeep locked and secured beside the cabin. It had been there less than a day when I got a call from my neighbor, saying a tow truck was dragging it off. When I rushed out there, I found the lock I installed completely cut. The Jeep already halfway up the ramp. Karen standing by like she owned the place. She claimed it was an abandoned vehicle on community grounds and cited some HOA bylaw I'd never even seen. What she didn't realize was that the Jeep wasn't just mine, it belonged to a task force, still loaded with undercover surveillance gear, cameras, comms, sensitive equipment. And now it was in the back of a tow truck, headed who knows where. That was the moment everything shifted. Within minutes, unmarked vehicles rolled up, and what happened next had Karen looking like she saw a ghost. Her face went pale, and suddenly she wasn't shouting about the HOA anymore. But this wasn't just about a Jeep anymore. It was about what she had tampered with, and the fallout. Let's just say it spiraled way beyond anything she expected. Karen had always strutted around the neighborhood like she ran a private kingdom. Ever since I bought the lake cabin, she'd taken issue with everything from the color of my porch light to the type of guests I had over. I mostly ignored her, figuring she just needed to feel important. But cutting my lock and towing my Jeep without warning? That crossed a line. Especially because that Jeep wasn't just a vehicle, it had been loaned to me by the agency I worked with during my last assignment. It was equipped for surveillance with some pretty serious tech tucked behind the panels. At first, she acted smug, waving some crumpled HOA notice about unauthorized vehicles on HOA property. But my cabin sits just outside their jurisdiction, something I confirmed years ago when I bought the place. Turns out, Karen had taken it upon herself to extend the boundary line. Something I didn't know until I got home and saw that she'd marked off part of my land with plastic HOA signs and freshly posted rules. I started digging and found she'd been targeting other neighbors, two ones who didn't fight back. The tow company had no idea what they were transporting, and when they popped the rear lock to check the VIN, they triggered a silent alarm. That's when the black SUV rolled up, and two plainclothes agents stepped out, calm but firm. Karen's attitude flipped instantly, but it was already too late. The situation had escalated far beyond a neighborhood dispute. As the agents quietly examined the Jeep, Karen kept pacing, shouting that she was just enforcing the rules and doing what the HOA president should have handled months ago. But her voice started to crack when one of the agents opened the glove box and pulled out a secured case with a federal seal. She froze. She must have realized then that she hadn't just towed someone's weekend ride, she'd interfered with federal property. Still, she tried to play it off, saying she had no way of knowing and that it wasn't her fault the Jeep wasn't clearly marked. The agents didn't say much, but one of them started making calls. I stood quietly, arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold. I had no intention of letting her slide on this. What she didn't know was that this entire neighborhood had been under light investigation for months due to a string of property-related scams. And Karen's name had already come up in more than one report. She wasn't just nosy, she was connected to suspicious transfers of land ownership, most involving elderly residents who suddenly decided to move out and sell their property for well below market value. My cabin, tucked near the lake and off the main road, had somehow made her list too. While the agents continued their inspection, one of them pulled me aside. "We've been waiting for her to make a mistake big enough," he said quietly. "This might be it." I didn't respond. I just watched Karen start to sweat. Karen's hands started trembling as the agents surrounded the tow truck. Then pulled out a notepad and began asking her pointed questions. She kept glancing at me, hoping I'd step in and smooth things over like this was some HOA dispute. But this time, I said nothing. I wanted her to feel what it was like to mess with the wrong person. And this wasn't just about me anymore. She had cut the lock off a federal vehicle and had unknowingly tampered with undercover cop gear. That alone was serious, but paired with the other things she'd been involved in, it was starting to look a lot worse. The atmosphere at the lake cabin grew tense. A second vehicle rolled in, this one unmarked. 2 plainclothes officers stepped out and quietly joined the discussion. One of them nodded toward the Jeep, then toward me. Karen noticed the exchange and grew visibly more agitated. "I didn't know," she shouted. "I thought it was just some abandoned car." Her voice cracked again, but this time there was no sympathy in the air. One of the neighbors had come out with their phone, quietly filming from a distance. Everyone had heard stories about Karen, but seeing her squirm under real pressure was something else. A radio call crackled through one of the agent's vests, and he nodded sharply before signaling the others. They moved in toward the truck. Karen backed up, eyes wide. "Wait, what's happening?" she asked. But no one answered. Not yet. As the agents closed in on the tow truck, one of them suddenly stopped and stared at something on his tablet. He called over a colleague, whispering while pointing to the screen. Karen, clearly shaken, tried to inch away from the scene, mumbling about how she didn't mean anything by it. But just as things were heating up, the second twist hit. Like a punch to the gut, the lead agent turned toward me and asked if I had recently received any legal notices or offers related to the property. I was confused, but told him about a strange envelope I'd found stuffed in my cabin's mailbox a week ago. It looked official, but the HOA stamp on it seemed off, so I hadn't paid much attention. His eyes narrowed. That notice was fake. He said, "We believe it was part of a broader scheme." Turns out, Karen wasn't just flexing her HOA muscle, she was running a quiet little side hustle, manipulating property records and orchestrating unauthorized towing and fake citations to push owners out of their cabins. The Jeep incident had unintentionally exposed her whole operation. But what really twisted the knife? The name that showed up on a few of those forged documents, my name. Someone had used my identity to authorize one of the false removals. Now, I wasn't just a victim, I was being dragged into a bigger mess. And the evidence pointed straight to my cabin as a key part of the setup. And I still had no idea how deep it went. While I stood there trying to process how my name had ended up on forged documents, one of the agents stepped aside to take a call. He returned with a look that made my stomach drop. "We just got word," he said. "Your cabin might have been used as a meeting spot." I blinked, confused. A meeting spot? For what? He didn't answer directly, just told me to walk with him. As we circled the property, he pointed out a few things I had missed completely. A hidden trail behind the shed, boot prints leading into the woods, and a signal booster tucked behind a tree. I started feeling like my own cabin was a stranger to me. And that's when it got worse. The agent revealed that one of the people tied to the forged HOA documents was already under investigation for involvement in a local land flipping scam. The scam involved hacking into public property records and using outdated HOA bylaws to claim ownership over abandoned or quiet properties like mine, which had been empty for weeks. Then came the kicker: a drone. It suddenly buzzed overhead and hovered. One of the agents shouted and raised his hand, but the drone zipped off before anyone could track it. "That's not one of ours," he muttered. Karen, who had been sitting in the back of a squad car by now, looked more panicked than ever. Whatever she was part of, it was bigger than just a towing scam. And somehow, I was in the center of it. After the drone incident, everything started unraveling fast. Within 48 hours, the feds confirmed that Karen wasn't just a nosy neighbor, she was deeply tied to a fake HOA racket that had been targeting rural properties near the lake. Her board had been filing false claims, switching out lot numbers and obscure county records, then auctioning them off to shady buyers who thought they were legit. My Jeep, the lock she cut, and the gear inside weren't just collateral damage, they were evidence she never saw coming. Turns out, the undercover cop gear inside my Jeep was planted there on purpose, part of an ongoing operation I had unknowingly stepped into. The cabin hadn't been watched because of me, but because Karen's fake HOA had drawn too much heat. My early return just sped everything up. Karen ended up facing charges not just for trespassing and theft, but for fraud and conspiracy. The auction sales? All frozen. Most of the affected property owners got their titles restored, including me. I fixed the gate, changed every lock, and installed cameras. The cabin feels safe again, not just physically, but legally. If there's anything I learned, it's that sometimes the real danger doesn't wear a mask or sneak in through the woods. Sometimes it comes smiling, clipboard in hand, talking about community standards. So yeah, Karen may have tried to tow my Jeep, but she ended up exposing a whole criminal web